approve.
All right. You're safe. Thanks for being here. Welcome to the meeting of the Tax Abatement Study and Formulating Committee, meeting number umpty-ump. I've lost track. But we were very close at the last meeting, and our legal counsel pointed out that we have to have an officially final document in front of us to vote on. And so what we have in front of us is the markup to show you what's new, and then a clean copy, which is the one we'll vote on. So I will start by pointing out that we are required by state law to open it up for public comment. No one has signed up. Anybody in the room want to make public comment? Okay, doing that, I will move on to our review of any edits to the final report. So you can look at the one that's dated April 30th, which is the date, that's our deadline when we have to have it to council by, and that shows kind of the changes that were made in section 4, mostly just to clean up sort of the who's doing what reviews. There needs, we've called for a review of the priorities, both by the each of the agencies that administers these types of abatements. And then we also talked about creating what we're currently calling a mutual benefit committee. I don't know that that name has to be the final name. But a committee that would be made up of a representative of each of the agencies that administers those, as well as someone from finance, someone from legal, someone from the community. There were some suggestions made by, I have been giving this to members of the IDB board, the Health and Ed board, and other people, and saying, please give us your input. And one suggestion was that we might want to also throw in someone from the finance community, from the private finance community, someone from the development community. So I've listed those as possible members as well. So that's a change that's in here. There were a few numbers that were missing. We added the $200 million annually that we corrected at the last meeting for state nonprofit exemption, which we had no control over. That was just sort of a piece of information, as well as I did get the final numbers for sales taxes that are redirected for Sports Authority, which is about $5 million annually, and then the Convention Center is about $14 million annually. So I just thought it was useful to know what those amounts were. And then the biggest thing was to break up the review of the priorities in one paragraph, and then the review of the quantitative data that we're calling for. So we had talked a lot about the website under the trustees the web page under the trustees website that would have centralized, summarized data that says here are all the tax abatements that are out there, and then links to each of the agencies' websites for further detail. So we've called for specific things like when do they start, how long are they, how much money actually happens. And so we've called for that to be reported annually, and then we've called for it to be reviewed on a regular basis, which may or may not be annual, maybe slightly more, a slightly longer time, but just with an eye towards saying, do these amounts do the individual caps still seem appropriate? And in light of this and the health of Nashville, Mr. Finance Director, we think you have lots of leeway to give all kinds of additional abatements to new things that are happening, or we feel like you've kind of bumped up against what makes sense for Nashville right now. So that's in the green in section 4. You can see that. And then I did finally get the appendices neatened up, and I'm excited. It's probably easier to look at them in the cleaned up copy. At Angel's suggestion, I moved, in essence what I did was put them in order where they're mentioned in the report. So that got the Tax Transparency Incentive Database, TTID, whatever that stands for. It comes right after each of the description. I mean, we had a description of each of the types of abatements that are available, and we have tables that show each of those, and then we started talking about the need for this transparency database. And so half of the stuff that was in your write-up of what needed to be there is actually in the document, and anything that didn't make it into the immediate part of the document is in the appendix. it's been bumped up to Appendix G. And then Appendix H, the final appendix, is the summary of the total amounts for each category, as best we can find them in the past or project them into the future, and then showing that as a percentage of the overall operating budget for the city. And I mean, certainly anyone who wants to can dispute those numbers, it won't hurt my feelings. But based on the information that we were able to get by the time we went to press, it does look like in FY 2015 that the abatements that were being given then were about 0.6% of the overall operating budget. And we are now at about 1.4%, and in theory, if some really big things happen, that might be as much as 1.9% of the operating budget. This report does not ultimately say that that's the metric that it should be measured against, but that's one of the ones that we talked about. Some of the others that were suggested in the document that finance gave us were maybe we compare this to the overall net asset value of all of Metro's worth, or our overall debt service, or something like that. This one to me is just easier to wrap my brain around, so that's the one that ended up showing up here. So, other comments or questions or thoughts?
I sent you over the updated PDF, but it's the same one. I don't think you got it.
So again, I believe if you look at all the, and here's our trustee, welcome. If you look at all the language, it's either in the text or in the, so it's broken up into two parts and pieces.
Okay.
But I believe it is all there. I did my best to do that. And some of this I sent it to Margaret and went to my day job. So if I missed anything,
I just wanted to be sure that we had that piece in there. So then
it's split in two, but I believe it is.
Okay.
Other questions or comments or thoughts? And Madam Trustee, we are, your office is mentioned in here as the keeper of the centralized database.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. And I think we probably just need to put in there too. I think we had looked at a couple other places that we just.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, well, it's not we just needed to. We wanted to make sure we had. When we had observed, we noticed that they had the different persons that were the pilots or the TIFs were housed. And so we do tax freeze, and it wasn't mentioned there. And then we also do the tax abatement, and it wasn't mentioned there.
So if that's information you sent me the last time I sent you stuff, I've incorporated it.
Okay.
If it came today, if you had sent comments today,
We hadn't sent those.
I mean, I got some comments from you
a while back.
and those are in there.
This is for the historic property tax abatement. It would be housed in our office, and the tax freeze, and I think we added the code to that. But,
So there's some edits for the freeze section and some general comments about the other sections.
Yeah.
If that's
So you should, if you don't, here is
it's more updated.
this is the latest and greatest right there. That's two versions.
Oh,
One
okay.
is a
All right,
green
thank you,
markup, and
ma'am.
the other is that. We'll give y'all a section to see if what you want is in there.
Thank you.
We hope so, because our council says we have to bless a clean copy, which we have, which we think is right.
Thank you for your.
Anything that I know has been sent my way, I have incorporated.
On the 316 section, wanted to change some rewording on that. 316 is on page 10 if you look at the bottom.
316.
But 316 section 3.6. No, 3.6, I'm sorry, I keep saying 16. 3.6.
Gotcha.
So one of my comments is you mentioned the annual budget, and I know that's mentioned throughout here, but I think a better phrasing would be the annual impact to the budget, because you know, because each one of these are, like for the tax freeze, the impact is an annual one. And the annual impact on this one, it says in the range of 5 million, but the last few years it's been only, been less than 4 for, it's been around 4 if you take the average since 2021.
Gotcha.
And before 2021, the impact was like, less than, right around 1 million. So it went up due to the tax, you know, the tax increase. So,
Which is not
yeah,
good.
so if the council, whatever the council decides on the tax rate, it could not, you know, it could be lower or more than the 5 million. So I didn't, and wanted to mention the TCA code that the reference, because you say state law in here, but don't mention which law allows for that, whereas the other sections of this do have either the council vote, so if someone's looking at it 5-10 years from now, they know where to
Where you go look for that?
where to go look for it if they want to get a better understanding of that program.
And it's included in that copy that I gave you, Councilmember Allen.
Gotcha.
So you have it here.
And then on 3.5, that's the historic abatement. While the housing, well, it's the Metro Historic Zoning Commission votes and approve, the bills are generated against the tax rate, and the annual budget, that's the 20 million, I think, is based on the assessed value. That's not what the annual impact to the budget would be.
Correct.
So, so that doesn't say how much revenue wouldn't received. And since we hadn't received one this year, yet, we don't, you know, at least from the trustee's office, we really don't know what
Yeah, So-
the annual impact to the budget would be.
right. That, I think that's a cap that was part of the legislation enabling that.
Yeah, it's a
Let
cap to
me-
the appraised value.
If you look back at Appendix H, at the very, very back of the report, it's a little 8.5 by 11. So we show the
Okay, you got the codes back there.
Yeah, and we show the property tax freeze, and begin with the 1.9 that you mentioned, and show the information that you gave me as closely as I knew it. So I'm showing it about on 4 million going forward
Okay,
as a projection, so hopefully that's close enough. And then on the historic property tax abatement, we're showing that, I mean, this is the area where we show what, you know, what impact year by year, if any, it has had in the past, or we think it might have in the future. And the future projections are, you know, educated guesses, but
Yes.
not based on anything. So, so in that one, on the historic property abatement, we're projecting, based on the Second Avenue study, that 9.9 million annually.
Okay.
It's the very last page. It's a little skinny, I mean, at the very, very, very back. Behind the 11 by 17 pages, yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay.
So hopefully that addresses that.
Yes.
We do need that TCA annotation. Margaret, what are our options here?
I think that when you are making, whoever is making the motion to approve, if you make the motion to approve with a specific change acknowledged as part of your motion, I think that is fine. Last time, it was kind of like, oh yeah, go ahead and make all these changes that we conceptually discussed, and that's not okay, but if you have a specific addition, just incorporate that into your motion.
Gotcha. So it sounds like we've addressed 2 of the 3 issues that you raised. What we haven't addressed yet is the tax freeze TCA reference.
Yes.
And Josh can fill that in for us, but we'll, as part of our motion, we'll ask to have that added. We do have the historic property tax abatement in there, so
Yep.
that is the only one missing. Thank you for pointing that out. Glad you're here. Anything else?
Oh, well, if the committee has some, I do have something else. I
Okay.
didn't want to yield. The other, one other, well, it's more than other, but additional thing is on the pilots that are managed by the health and education the Health and Education Facilities Board. We mentioned, well, the report mentions mixed income, but we, just in the past 2 weeks, we were informed of a parking garage that they also did a pilot for, which I would pretty much gather that is not a mixed income facility. And so I did, so. Oh, okay, I'm sorry that okay. So that's something that was, until we received the email this week, the last 2 weeks, wouldn't have known that was an entity that was happened, but it was approved like 5 years ago by the Health and Education Facilities.
I mean, technically there, and Marvin, help me out here, the Health and Ed Facilities Board, I mean, the mixed income pilot is a new thing for them to do. Until that, what they did was,
They primarily would issue bonds for the conduit debt financing for projects in
Okay.
the county. Those may or may not have included a pilot agreement at the time, but that would be separate from the mixed income pilot style.
gotcha. So that would be more like what the IDB does. I mean,
Both IDB and Health and Ed are in the primary business of issuing conduit debt.
issuing conduit debt
To help
is,
finance projects.
conduit debt is actually bonds.
Those are, they're bonds that are issued by these boards that have no recourse to the board or to the Metropolitan government.
Right, and that's a different animal, that doesn't
That's correct.
have anything to do with tax abatement things. And so when we talk about this pilot that the Health and Ed Board has just done for a parking garage, is
Yeah.
that an entirely new thing that they've never done
It was
before?
done
Well,
5 years ago, and we just got informed because we hadn't, the office hadn't billed them the 50% because it was a tax-free for the first 5 years and then goes to 50% the second 5 years.
Okay,
So it was, we just found out about it last week.
okay.
I just want to, provide context.
this is good, that's why we invited you.
Now, prior to has Health and Ed Board always had this ability to do pilots?
They do have the ability to enter into pilot agreements.
And what is the criteria that they would have done that for in the past?
Usually, a pilot agreement that one of these boards would enter into would not be for, it would not be for incentive purposes, it would be to, it would be to kind of support the bonds that are being issued. So, or actually, I reverse that, they would enter a pilot and have bonds to kind of pay for that pilot. I don't know all the parameters that the Health and Ed Board would have issued a pilot in the past for. I'm just not up to speed on that. I would have to go back and look at that as well, but it would be for the same purpose to offer, the tax abatement for the construction. Is this, where is this parking garage?
I can forward you the document so that you can have time to look at it whenever, okay.
Where is it? Which
It's,
parking garage?
let me,
Is it near the library? Is it?
nope, no, it's, because HCA is paying the bill. I'm trying to, because Josh, here we go. All right. It's, they call it this, it's a Centennial, it says Centennial Parking Garage, the old Lentz Clinic.
Is that when they did the swab?
Oh, yeah.
There was that property
Yeah.
swap. that
Yeah,
happened
the property swab.
For the new spot where.
For the new
Lentz
health
is.
department, so
department,
that's why it would
yeah.
be under the Health and Ed Board, I reckon.
Yeah.
So what category does that fit into?
Yeah, 'cause I just assumed, that it wasn't mixed income, so, and
It seems to me this is a great further reasoning for the tax incentive transparency database.
Exactly.
And so
Yeah.
that's who I don't think that I don't expect this report to have represented everything that's ever. Hopefully, it gets a good approximation, collects our collective knowledge over the last year or so. Going forward, all tax abatements will be in this database. And so there's probably, if there's this thing floating around, there's probably another thing. And hopefully our recommendations for council, which I think we've illustrated in here, sort of captures that going forward, we'll need to have a better eye on this type of stuff, and we'll have the mechanism in place through the trustee's office that'll help to capture these types of things.
Gotcha. Is there a single sentence we could?
I mean, I think, I tend to agree. I mean, I think we could keep going and drilling down and down and down, but I think, overall, I think we've captured in general, and I know that project, it's good to know that project, so,
Yeah, it's great.
yeah. I think the specific citation on 3.5 is helpful. But very much appreciate the transparency.
Yeah.
yeah, if it had, it wasn't informed last week,
Right.
I wouldn't know, and that was because the ACA contacted and say, hey, we want to pay the bill. It's like, yeah, they want to pay the bill, so if
Isn't
they,
that what everybody calls your office?
That's right. And we do say pilots have been administered by MDHA, HEFB, and the IDB. So the general structure of TIFs and pilots is as follows, so, anything else? I'm scared to ask.
And this, and I would say this, all the programs in there. In the very beginning, I think one of the earlier meetings, we were discussing, at least sitting on where I'm sitting, discussing who sends the invoices out for those. So like for the pilots, who sends the invoices, and while we discuss which agency is the primary admin, it does not mention that the Industrial Development Board finance is the person who, if they're gonna send the invoice out, or MDHA depends on what,
Right.
which program, who's sending out the board, or like the historical abatement, that would affect the tax bills, and so, and finding out now, reading, it looks like the Health and Education Facility Board, the trustee's office is going to be the person responsible, but I never read those documents because I was like, oh, it didn't really, until this came up, now I'm starting reading like, oh, it mentions that the trustee's office would be the person who sends the bills. So, but to your point of it not being, it can't have everything at one time, that'd be great for the database. It's just who is responsible for, if you want to know where the bill's coming from, this is the agency that the bill is coming from.
Gotcha.
In addition to the agency that was the facilitator and got the program up and going.
Duly noted. And I will say, the next step after this is gonna be council legislation that will formalize this process.
Okay.
And so, that legislation, Margaret, you can help me out on this, will be sent to, I think, all the people who participated in this process for comment, so that will be an opportunity. In that legislation, we will, it's kind of the next step of what do we need to spell out in terms of things that are gonna happen. So in terms of spelling out the database, that can be, I think, mentioned in the legislation, that we need to remember that. So it is duly recorded into the minutes of this meeting.
Well, last thing with the trustee's office, is not mentioned as a speaker or being present in any of the activities.
We can make that specific.
Yeah, you don't mention that we were here. So that's my last comment. I yield to the trustee.
And I did ask you to come on short notice, so that would be another thing on the Appendix A where we list the speakers. Thank you for graciously pointing that out so that we could correct our sin of omission, which we will happily do right now. So I think that, some of these comments will be incorporated into the legislation, and we have 2 corrections that we will incorporate into the,
And the
Do we wanna put that in the introduction where we
so
talk?
in Appendix A,
Yeah.
so it may need to appear 2 places.
We talked about the
Who
committee
came to
and
talk?
then, who we consulted with, heard
So
from
that-
Metro Development.
We heard from, if we
Yeah.
prefer to do this, we sort of did it in MDHA,
Trustees
National
office.
Parks.
Yeah, maybe we put the trustees up.
I think that would be
That would
great.
be-
I think it's a.
Yeah.
Okay, we will put that after the Affordable Housing Division, because I
And,
think that's.
and I think it's particularly important because they're coming up in the report,
Right.
so it's nice to know up front that
Obviously.
they were here for those conversations.
If anyone can remember chronologically when they appeared, which is kind of how I did this. Right, we're gonna put you after MDHA, the Metro trustee. And I'm just gonna in general say the Metro trustee, and then in the back where we list the speaker, I'm gonna put you, Madam Trustee, or do you want to?
That's fine, yeah.
Okay, those are all very, very important comments, and I appreciate y'all's participation every step of the way.
We appreciate you.
And I apologize for not acknowledging it.
You're a very busy lady.
Okay, well, this is why we welcome all input all along the way. Any other comments or thoughts, or?
The appendix, they still have the wrong letter. The G and the H are not on the final document.
Okay, hold on.
In the table of contents.
In the table of contents. It is Appendix G
There's no G.
and Appendix H is the summary. On page,
I don't know what page it is.
let's see, here, page 30, and you took up 1 page, and this is page 31. Okay, so I believe that what I am looking for in the way of a motion.
Okay, got it?
Question, on page 11, the number of properties, did you say what the number was?
4,777.
Okay.
That should be in there.
I'm looking at some.
It says affects roughly 4,800 properties. I figured I didn't need to be
Oh, I
correct
see
that.
it, okay.
So remember, Alan, I did have a quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
There was a mention of a review and coming together again, just to make sure that everything's updated. I didn't see, is there a time frame, or like how often you're gonna do that, or a recommendation for that?
I think that I have very specifically said each department needs to do that annually.
Got it.
Well, and then we refer to the MDHA process, which specifically calls for a 7-year sort of super review.
Okay,
And I think it's up to each department to set that, but to have something.
okay,
And
very
we've
good.
called for that for a regular review, and then we have talked about this mutual benefit committee being convened once a year to look at the data that we're requiring, and then just to consult with the
Awesome, okay.
finance director and say, are we getting close to something that feels like a cap, or keep going?
Thank you.
All right, so the changes we're gonna make are reference to the trustee's office in the introduction. Reference to TCA,
PBD.
It's the,
Appendix B.
I was gonna say, add the tax freeze TCA reference to the chart on Appendix B. And we wanna reference the Metro trustee in the Appendix A as well.
As the speaker. Into,
3.6, the impact.
to add the Appendix H in the
And if,
table of contents.
And could I also say that, you might wanna say like, and to correct the page numbering, because I think that's also needs to be updated in the table
Okay.
of contents.
And to correct the page numbering in the table of contents.
And now you're gonna address the annual budget in 3.6, he said related something to
We
impact.
can, I mean, I feel like we've used that language for all of them in terms of the impact on the budget.
Okay.
And I think especially what you pointed out was there's the actual details of the numbers on one can
In the
refer
appendix
to
H.
the
Okay.
final appendix to see what.
What the impact was, okay.
All right, so we probably need to hear that one more time as an official motion. Are we ready for that?
Yep.
Let me make sure I've got them.
There should be 4.
So reference to the trustee's office in the introduction and, I'll come back and frame the motion, but reference to the trustee's office in the introduction and appendix A as a speaker, on the speaker list. Add the tax freeze reference to the chart in appendix B. Add appendix G to the table of contents.
H to the table of contents. Correct appendix G and add appendix H.
And then correct page numbering and formatting and any other non-substantive changes.
Material. I believe that's it.
Well, with that, I would make a motion to approve the tax incentive and abatement study and formulating committee report dated April 10th, 2024, with the following changes: adding reference to the trustee's office in the introduction and appendix A, referencing the tax freeze program adding the tax freeze program to the chart in appendix B, correcting appendix G and adding appendix H to the table of contents, and making such other corrections for page numbering, formatting, and non-substantive changes as the chair deems necessary.
I have a motion.
Second.
Is there a second? Any discussion? Are we ready to vote? Ms. Sims,
Yes.
you ready to vote? All right. All those in favor say
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. All right, are there any other items we need to discuss?
Great work, thank you
Do
for
we-
doing this.
Thank you all for
Thank you,
being
Chair.
here. Thank
Thank
our
you all.
support
Thank you.
team for coming after many, many meetings. Then I will say that we are adjourned.
Thank you.